Section 1. The silent ache beneath a normal life. You wake up on time, you brush your teeth, answer your messages, check your notifications, and begin the day. You do what needs to be done. You say what needs to be said. You smile when expected, nod when appropriate, and contribute your piece to the quiet machinery of a well-ordered life, and yet something inside feels displaced. Distant, hollow, not broken, exactly just muted. You may have a decent job, a partner who loves you, friends who make you laugh. You may even have dreams that are slowly unfolding. But beneath all of it, there's a faint but constant whisper, a tension in your chest that doesn't go away, a low-level ache that no amount of productivity, dopamine, or meditation seems to silence. It's the kind of discomfort that doesn't scream, it haunts. A quiet existential dissonance that lives between your routines. A feeling that something real is missing, and worse, that you've forgotten what that real even is. Are not alone across the modern world. Countless people feel this hidden emptiness while living lives that look perfectly fine. They function, they contribute, they smile on cue, but something in them is tired of performing, tired of playing a part. They no longer remember auditioning for Carl Jung called this the tragedy of the false self, not in a dramatic, pathological sense, but as a quiet adaptation, a survival mechanism that begins early in life, when we realize that being fully ourselves, raw, expressive, chaotic, is often punished, judged, or rejected. We learn to shrink, we curate, we adapt, we become agreeable, efficient, useful. In short, we become acceptable. But what gets buried in that exchange? The soul. The soul does not speak in resumes or social media bios. It does not care for likes or retweets or validation. It hungers not for applause, but for expression, for depth, for something ancient and wild and unspeakably honest. And when you silence that hunger for too long, the soul begins to ache, not loudly, but enough for you to notice when the room gets quiet. Enough for you to feel it in moments of stillness. Enough for you to wake up in the middle of the night and wonder, why don't I feel like myself anymore? This ache isn't illness, it's not weakness, it's not depression. It's a signal, a sacred one, a psychic alarm sounding from the depths of your being, reminding you that somewhere along the way, you traded your essence for approval. You stopped being whole so that you could be safe. Jung believed that the greatest damage to the human spirit comes not from failure, but from fragmentation. When parts of the self are abandoned, denied, or rejected, the psyche compensates by building armor. You become what the world expects, and over time, you mistake that armor for identity. But armor is heavy, it's exhausting to carry. And the soul, the true self, doesn't thrive under layers of protection. It withers, it waits, and when the waiting becomes unbearable, it speaks in symptoms, in numbness, anxiety, apathy, insomnia, fatigue. Your body begins to grieve a life you're no longer living, a life you once felt, a life that belonged to you in a culture obsessed with productivity. It's easy to misread this ache as laziness or burnout, or lack of ambition. But maybe it's something deeper. Maybe the part of you that once danced, or screamed, or created without apology is still in there, buried beneath the noise. And what if this ache is not a flaw but a compass? A quiet pull back to the parts of yourself you left behind in order to survive? You are not broken, you are buried. This is not a diagnosis, it's a revelation, a call to pause, to listen, to dig. Because beneath the perfectly fine exterior, there is a voice asking, what if I stopped pretending? What if I came home to myself? And that's where the journey begins, not with answers, but with honesty, not with repair, but with remembrance. We live in a world that rewards the mask, but the soul is not interested in rewards. It wants something far more dangerous and far more beautiful. It wants the truth. And now, the question remains, are you willing to hear it? Section 2. The lie we had to live. Every child is born whole, raw, vivid, unfiltered. They laugh loudly, cry suddenly, ask dangerous questions, and say things that make adults uncomfortable in their early years. They are closest to the source, not yet edited, not yet curated. But very early on, something changes. They learn that not every part of themselves is welcome. The boy who cried too easily is told to toughen up. The girl who shouted too loudly is taught to shrink. The sensitive child is mocked. The curious one is shut down. The child who showed too much anger, too much joy, too much truth, learns over time. To wear a mask, this is not abuse in the conventional sense. This is socialization. You learn to shape-shift not out of malice, but out of necessity. You adapt to survive. You become who they need you to be, because approval feels like love, and love in a child's world is survival. Carl Jung spoke of this trait as one of the most dangerous moments in human development, when we first betray our inner world to protect ourselves from outer rejection. He called this the beginning of the persona, the public face. It's not a lie in the way we usually understand it. It's not deliberate, it's existential. We learn to live a life that isn't fully ours, and we carry this adaptation into adulthood. Mistaking it for identity, we say, "This is just who I am," never realizing that the I we're referring to is a construction, a collection of habits and preferences designed to maintain acceptance, not authenticity. This is the lie. We had to live the lie that says, "If I am good enough, they will love me." The lie that says, "If I stay small, I will be safe." The lie that says, "If I keep performing, no one will see how scared I really am," and it works until it doesn't. Eventually, the cost of this lie becomes too high. The mask starts to slip. The performance becomes exhausting, and the soul, long neglected, begins to rebel, not through tantrums or explosions, but through quiet sabotage. You forget how to dream. You lose interest in things you once loved. You become numb, maybe even successful on the outside, but emotionally bankrupt within. And that is where most people get stuck. They think something is wrong with them. They search for motivation, for purpose, for a quick fix. But what they're really looking for is themselves, because deep down, you know the life you are living is only a partial truth. You know there is more to you than what you show, but you've been showing it for so long. You're afraid to stop. You're afraid of what might happen if you drop the act. This is where Jung's work becomes a map. He believed that real healing does not come from self-improvement, but from self-confrontation, from having the courage to ask, who did I have to become in order to be loved? And what did I have to bury in order to be safe? The answers are rarely simple, and they are never comfortable, because they reveal a painful paradox. You had to lie in order to survive, but the lie is now what's killing you. To begin waking up is to admit that your suffering is not meaningless. It is a protest, a rebellion of the authentic self against a life of emotional compliance. You are not falling apart. You are being urged to break character. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard once said, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are." And Jung would have agreed, because despair is often the price of fitting in too well, of doing everything right and still feeling wrong. The tragedy isn't that we lie to others. The tragedy is that we believe our own lie. We begin to think that the persona is the person, that the smile is real, that the mask is our face, and when the soul tries to speak, we silence it with noise. Work, drugs, sex, religion, perfectionism. Anything but the truth. But what if the pain isn't the problem? What if it's the doorway? This section isn't here to shame you, it's here to wake you, to remind you that underneath the roles you play, there is a buried self, one that still remembers who you were before the world told you who to be. And here's the truth: no one tells you that self isn't gone, it's just exiled. But exile is not death. The self can be recovered, not by returning to childhood, but by reclaiming what was lost there. The boldness, the creativity, the sensitivity, the rage, the joy, the questions, all of it still lives within you. You didn't fail, you adapted, you survived. But now you must evolve, because living someone else's version of your life may have earned you acceptance, but it cost you something greater, yourself, and that is a debt the soul will never stop trying to collect. Section 3. The shadow speaks in symbols. There are parts of you that you do not know, not because they are invisible, but because you've chosen not to look. These parts exist in what Carl Jung called the shadow, not evil, not monstrous, but simply repressed, forgotten, banished. Shadow is not just your anger, your fear, your jealousy. It's your desire to speak when you were told to be quiet, your urge to cry when you were told to be strong, your instinct to rebel when the world demanded obedience. The shadow is not what's wrong with you, it's what you were not allowed to be, and like all banished things, it doesn't disappear, it waits. Jung said that the shadow doesn't die. It disguises itself. It sneaks into your dreams, your addictions, your obsessions. It sabotages your relationships. It flares up in traffic. It slips into sarcasm, anxiety, depression. It becomes the unseen hand behind decisions you don't understand until you face it. It runs your life, and here's the paradox. The shadow doesn't scream, it whispers. It speaks in symbols, in dreams you dismiss, patterns you repeat, triggers you can't explain. Every time you explode at something small, every time you fall into the same relationship dynamic, every time you feel that gut sense of guilt, shame, or inexplicable sadness, your shadow is speaking. And the question is, are you listening? In the modern world, we are taught to fix, medicate the symptoms, eliminate the discomfort. But Jung's approach was the opposite. He didn't ask, how do I get rid of this? He asked, what is this trying to tell me? He believed that symptoms are not enemies, they are messages from the parts of you that were never allowed to speak. A panic attack isn't random, it's communication. Chronic apathy is not laziness, it's the cost of disconnection. Obsession, addiction, overthinking, rage, people-pleasing, perfectionism, none of these are flaws. They are survival codes, emotional encryption, the language of the shadow, but we ignore them because symbols are inconvenient. They don't fit into spreadsheets or self-help checklists. They ask you to feel, to reflect, to remember, and most dangerously, they ask you to stop pretending. When you start to decode the shadow's language, your life begins to look different. You stop asking why you're not more productive, and start asking why you feel worthless without productivity. You stop trying to numb your anxiety, and begin wondering what part of you is dying in silence. You stop blaming others for your patterns, and begin seeing the mirror they offer you. That's when the transformation begins, because Jung wasn't interested in perfection, he was interested in wholeness. Not a sanitized version of yourself, but a complete one. He didn't believe in erasing the darkness, he believed in integrating it. Knew that the parts of you you've buried are not your enemies, they're your power misused. They become destructive, but integrated. They become electric. Imagine your rage channeled into assertiveness, your fear transformed into intuition, your grief turned into compassion, your envy into ambition, your shame into humility. The shadow, when embraced, becomes strength. It stops haunting your life from the basement and steps into the light, as in a lie. But to do this, you must be willing to look at what you don't want to see. You must be willing to sit with the dream that disturbed you, the childhood memory that still stings, the harsh truth about how you treat others or yourself. You must stop saying, I'm fine, when your body is screaming. Otherwise, the shadow doesn't ask you to be fearless. It asks you to be honest about your limitations, honest about your rage, honest about the parts of you that still crave validation, still fear abandonment, still ache to be seen. Jung called this process shadow work, the brave inner labor of reclaiming your lost self. And it is labor, not romantic, not easy, often terrifying, but it is also holy, because in the darkness of the shadow lies your greatest creative force, your truest voice, your real identity. You are not broken because you feel pain. You are not weak because you struggle. You are simply being invited, summoned, to return to what you've exiled, to stop fixing and start listening. So, ask yourself, what have I been ignoring? What part of me is trying to speak through my mood swings, my stress, my sadness, my restlessness? What have I labeled bad or unacceptable that might actually be my soul begging for integration? The shadow is not here to destroy you, it is here to complete you, but it will not shout, it will not fight, it will wait silently until you're ready to remember who you were before the world taught you who to be. Section 4. The Mirror of Culture. How Society Rewards the False Self. You were born authentic, but the world didn't want your authenticity. It wanted your compliance from your earliest moments. You were shaped not for freedom, but for adaptation. You were taught not how to be yourself, but how to be liked. Not how to think, but how to fit. Not how to feel, but how to perform, and slowly, like a stone eroded by the sea, you became a reflection of other people's expectations. The real you went underground, and something else took its place, the false self. Carl Jung warned of this, what he called the persona. A mask, a socially accepted identity designed to navigate the world. The persona is not inherently evil, in fact. It's necessary, but the tragedy occurs when you forget it's a mask, when the act becomes the reality because the world doesn't. Just tolerate this performance. It rewards it. You get praised for being polite. Even when you're angry, you're called mature for staying quiet. Even when you're dying inside, you're admired for your success. Even if it cost you your soul, society is not designed to help you become whole. It is designed to make you functional, predictable, productive, polite. It wants workers, not rebels, consumers, not contemplatives, performers, not prophets. And so we create avatars of ourselves, curated identities, smiling masks, polished versions. We post them, sell them, project them, until we begin to believe they are real. But here's the hidden cost. The more you are rewarded for your mask, the more punished you feel when you take it off. The more affirmed you are for being agreeable, the more ashamed you become for feeling anger. The more you're seen for your success, the more invisible your pain becomes, and slowly, the inner fracture grows. This fracture isn't always dramatic. It shows up in subtle ways: the dead stare in the mirror, the inability to enjoy your own company, the discomfort in silence, the addiction to validation, the fear of being alone. Not because you need others, but because you don't know who you are without their gaze. This isn't an accident, it's a cultural pattern we are raised inside systems that manufacture identities based on class, gender, race, productivity, achievement, and each of these comes with a script. If you follow the script, you are rewarded with approval. If you challenge it, you are punished with exile. But exile from what? From the group? Or from the illusion? Jung believed that true individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires you to step outside of the collective script, to question the values you've been given, to ask yourself, what part of me is truly mine? What part is inherited, conditioned, borrowed? This is a dangerous question, because when you ask it, you may realize that the life you've built isn't yours, that your job, your relationship, your beliefs, even your dreams might be replicas, and that realization is terrifying but also liberating, because if you built a life based on who you were supposed to be, you can build a new life based on who you really are. But it begins with seeing the lie, not the lie of the world, but the lie you've made peace with, the lie you wake up to each day, the lie that says, this is good enough. When your soul is begging for more, not more money, not more love, more truth. Truth is dangerous. It threatens the stability of illusion. It destabilizes relationships built on performance. It dismantles identities built on achievement. It forces you to confront what's real and what's rehearsed. So, ask yourself, when you say you're happy, who are you performing for? When you say you're fine, what part of you is silenced? When you follow the rules, do you feel safe or hollow? Jung didn't offer comfort, he offered confrontation. He didn't promise peace, he promised depth, because he knew what the world forgets. Peace without truth is just sedation, and most people are sedated, numbed by routine, distracted by noise, addicted to image. Underneath the numbness, the soul waits. It waits for you to break the performance, to stop chasing applause, to stop asking what will make you liked, and start asking what will make you alive. This is the beginning of realignment. When you start to shift from external validation to internal resonance, when you begin to trade applause for authenticity, when you stop asking how to be loved and start asking how to be real. And the truth is, being real is messy. It doesn't guarantee popularity. It doesn't come with a script, but it does come with something far more valuable: freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, the freedom to be who you are, even if that means being misunderstood, even if it means losing people who loved your mask but couldn't handle your truth. You don't need to destroy the persona. You just need to know it's a mask, and you need the courage to take it off, especially when it no longer fits, because behind the mask is something far more sacred: a self not curated, not controlled, but whole. Section 5. The Descent. Why breakdown is a portal. There comes a moment when the mask can't hold anymore. You wake up, and the performance feels like a prison. You say the right things, do the right things, and yet your soul feels like it's suffocating. The applause grows louder, but the silence inside you becomes unbearable. This is the breakdown, and everything in modern culture tells you it's a failure, or told to fix it, patch it, medicate it, escape it. You're taught that falling apart is dangerous, shameful, weak, that breakdown means dysfunction, that sadness is a disease, that anger is unacceptable, that emptiness must be filled. But what if it isn't a malfunction? What if it's a message? Carl Jung didn't see breakdown as pathology. He saw it as initiation, a necessary unraveling, a confrontation between who pretend to be and who you truly are. The descent, Jung said, is sacred because what collapses isn't the soul, it's the scaffolding built to contain I. They called it the night sea journey, a dark plunge into the unconscious, a fall that isn't meant to be avoided, but endured, because only through this darkness do we find the buried self in mythology. The hero never becomes whole without the underworld. In psychology, it's no different. There's no resurrection without the descent. But here's the paradox. The descent feels like death, not physical death, but ego death, the disintegration of your false identity, the collapse of narratives you've clung to, the loss of control you once thought kept you safe. This is the moment when people say, I lost myself, but the truth is, you're not losing yourself, you're losing who you were never meant to be. Breakdown begins when the soul refuses to remain buried. You feel it in panic attacks that come out of nowhere, in deep sadness that logic can't explain, in emotional reactions that seem irrational but hold decades of repressed truth. You find yourself crying and don't know why. You feel tired even after rest. You feel empty in rooms filled with people. This is not weakness. This is the psychic rupture before reintegration. Jung said, you meet your destiny on the road you take to avoid it. That means the breakdown is not accidental. It is the confrontation you've spent your entire life avoiding. The moment when every distraction, every persona, every defense mechanism collapses and all that's left is you. This is the shadow's doorway, the parts you've disowned. Begin to speak rage, shame, grief, envy, fear. Everything you buried surfaces not to destroy you, but to be seen. Because what is denied in the light returns in the dark, and until it is embraced, it will not leave. But here's the danger. Without context, this descent can feel like madness. You begin to question everything, your relationships, your career, your meaning. You might isolate, you might spiral, you might feel like a stranger in your own body. And that's why the world rushes in to offer sedatives, anything to get you back to normal. But what if normal was the real illness? What if the crisis isn't what's wrong with you, but what's trying to save you? We don't talk about this, not in schools, not in politics, not in pop culture, because a person who breaks the mask threatens the whole masquerade. A person who questions their pain might question everything else. Consumerism, conformity, control, but this silence has consequences. Millions suffer alone, thinking they're broken, when in truth, they are awakening. They are descending not into disorder, but into the parts of themselves they were taught to fear. Jung knew that healing is not linear. that the path back to the soul is not paved with comfort, but chaos, and only those willing to enter this chaos with open eyes will find the gold hidden within thee. Descent strips you, it humiliates you, but it also humbles you. It teaches you to listen to your body, your dreams, your triggers, your wounds. It forces you to slow down, to question, to grieve, and slowly something begins to shift. What once felt like death starts to feel like rebirth. The rage becomes clarity, the sadness becomes softness, the confusion becomes curiosity, the breakdown becomes a portal, and on the other side of that portal, something waits, not a new identity, not a new persona, but a quieter, deeper, more rooted version of yourself, one that doesn't need to perform, one that doesn't need to pretend, one that no longer chases light because it has learned to find power in the dark. Jung said, "There's no coming to consciousness without pain." And yet, this pain is not cruelty, it's aliveness, it's the return of the soul. So if you are breaking, do not run, stand still, breathe, listen. Beneath the collapse is not your end, but your beginning. Section 6. Integration, becoming the one you abandoned. Once the breakdown strips you bare, you are faced with something terrifying. There is no script left to follow, no roles to play, no image to maintain. And this blankness, this unfamiliar silence feels like a threat, but it's not a void, it's a space, and what you choose to fill that space with. That's the beginning of integration. Carl Jung knew that true healing was not about becoming someone new. It was about becoming someone true. Not reinvented, not idealized, but remembered, reclaimed, brought back from exile. Because here's the truth no one told you. The person you were meant to become never died. They were buried under expectations, under disappointments, under shame, and shoulds, under the need to be liked, accepted, understood. But they are still there beneath it, all waiting. Integration is the slow, sacred act of becoming that person again. It is not glamorous, it is not easy, it's not something you can purchase or perform. It's daily, it's quiet, it's uncomfortable, because it requires you to feel again, to feel fully, to stop running from emotions and start letting them teach you. It means learning the language of your soul, the way it whispers through discomfort, tension, desire. It means honoring your dreams, not as nonsense, but as symbols. It means paying attention to the friction in your relationships, the reactions you can't explain, the wounds that keep repeating. Because integration is not about fixing the shadow, it's about welcoming it home. Jung called this process individuation, the return to wholeness, a state where the conscious and unconscious, the light and the dark, are no longer enemies but allies, where the mask no longer hides the self, but dissolves into it. You don't integrate by intellectualizing your pain, you integrate by feeling it, naming it, giving it space. You sit with the sadness, you speak to the rage. You don't judge them, you get curious. Why are you here? What are you trying to show me? Every part of you has a story, even the ones you despise, the part that sabotages your success. Maybe it's terrified of being visible, the part that clings in relationships. Maybe it's still holding your 5-year-old self, the part that rages when you're ignored. Maybe it's spent a lifetime being silenced. Integration is the art of listening to the parts of you that no one else did it. It's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming honest with yourself, about what you feel, what you want, what you need, and what you will no longer tolerate. This is why most people never truly heal, because they want comfort, not confrontation. They want relief, not responsibility. But integration asks more of you. It asks you to rewrite your story, not as a victim, but as a witness, a creator, someone who didn't just survive, but chose to rebuild brick by brick, truth by truth, decision by decision. And slowly, the fragments start to align. You begin to set boundaries, not to punish others, but to protect your energy. You say no without guilt. You say yes to things that once scared you. You let go, not out of bitterness, but because you finally see what was never yours to hold. And the world notices. You speak differently, you move differently, not louder but clearer, not harder but firmer. Your presence no longer seeks approval, it radiates alignment. But there's something else you also grieve, because as you become the one you abandoned, you realize how long you left them waiting, how many years were spent living someone else's life, how many dreams were shelved, how many truths were silenced. There is sadness in waking up, because awakening reveals the time lost while asleep, and yet there's also forgiveness, not the kind handed out to others, but the kind you give to yourself, the quiet, tear-stained kind that says, "You didn't know better, but now you do, and that's enough." Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who you were told to be, not who the world demanded, but who your soul always remembered." That is integration, that is liberation, and from this place, you no longer need to chase healing, you become it. You carry it in your words, in your silence, in the way you show up for yourself, not because you're free from pain, but because pain no longer controls you. You now know how to speak to it, walk with it, learn from it. The descent was the initiation, but this quiet homecoming is your rebirth. Section 7. The return to reality, living whole in a fractured world. There is a strange illusion we carry about healing, that once we've found ourselves, the world will meet us with open arms, that authenticity will be celebrated, that honesty will be rewarded, that wholeness will make life easier. But that is not how this story unfolds. You do not return to a transformed world. You return to the same world, but with new eyes. And that changes everything, because once you begin to live in alignment, with truth instead of performance, with presence instead of pretense, you begin to feel just how fractured everything else still is. You notice how shallow the conversations feel, how performative the connections are, how much of society is built on the very same disconnection you just spent years unlearning. And suddenly, your clarity feels like alienation, but this is not regression. It is revelation. Carl Jung warned of this. He said that individuation, the return to wholeness, makes you a stranger to your own tribe. Because when you stop betraying yourself, you stop fitting into the systems that demand your betrayal. You see through the games, the power plays, the manipulations. You see how social structures reward obedience, not truth. How relationships are often based on roles, not reality. How work can drain your soul in exchange for status. And you feel the weight of knowing. To live whole in a fractured world means learning how to carry your integrity through distortion. This is the return to reality, but it is not a defeat. It is an initiation. The journey back to your soul was not meant to end in isolation. It was meant to forge resilience, so you could walk into the noise with silence in your chest, so you could exist within the madness and remain untouched by it. You become the anomaly. You begin to listen differently. You no longer react just to be understood. You no longer argue to prove your worth. You do not bend to be liked, because wholeness gives you something the world cannot counterfeit. Inner reference. You know who you are, not because of a title, not because of a role, but because you've met every part of yourself. And now you live by a different compass, one that doesn't swing wildly with praise or criticism, one rooted in something quieter, truer. This is not easy, but it is sacred, because the world doesn't need more performance, it needs presence. It doesn't need louder voices, it needs clearer ones. It doesn't need more noise, it needs stillness. That speaks, and that stillness begins with those brave enough to descend, face their pain, and return whole. The fractured world cannot pull you back unless you let it. But it will try. It will try through guilt. Who do you think you are to change? It will try through fear. What if no one understands you? It will try through comfort. Maybe it's easier to just go back to how it was, and every time, you will be asked to choose again, not the perfect choice, but the aligned one. And this is how the new self is built, not in grand gestures, but in daily defiance, in choosing honesty when lying would be easier, in staying grounded when panic whispers, in walking away when staying would mean self-abandonment. It is not about escaping the world. It is about moving through it like someone who finally remembers what they came here to protect, their soul, you'll still feel anger, still feel grief, still face betrayal, but none of it will define you. Because you've faced the place most people run from and come back whole. That wholeness does not guarantee a perfect life, but it gives you something rarer, a life that is actually yours. You will begin to notice the subtle miracles, peace in solitude, power in boundaries, joy in simplicity, and most of all, the unshakable knowing that even if the world misunderstands you, you no longer misunderstand yourself. This is the return not to the world as it is, but to who you were always meant to be within it, and from that place everything changes. Section 8. The myth of you, leaving a legacy of inner truth. At some point in every great myth, the hero returns from the underworld not with riches, but with knowledge, not with applause, but with awareness. What they carry isn't material, it's transformational, and so it is with you. You have walked through the ruins of your psyche. You have faced the shadows that once dictated your life. You have peeled off masks, grieved old selves, and touched the silence beneath the noise now. You're not who you were. You are something else, something raw, something real, but this isn't the end. Because the final stage of the journey is not transformation, it is transmission. You are no longer just a seeker of truth. You are a carrier of it, and whether you realize it or not, your very presence becomes mythological. Myth is not about fantasy, it's about meaning. Myth is what we become when we live symbolically, when every wound becomes a teaching, every loss a refining fire, every silence a sacred act. You may not have temples built in your name, but the way you live will echo. Carl Jung believed that the greatest legacy we leave is not our success, but our individuation, the way we integrate our contradictions, unify our soul, and live with radical self-honesty in a world addicted to lies. You won't need to preach, you won't need to convince. You'll simply exist differently, in a way that forces people to confront their own disconnection, in a way that makes the inauthentic uncomfortable, in a way that gives others silent permission to remember who they are. Because your healing doesn't stop with you. Your boundaries will inspire others to reclaim theirs. Your presence will expose the chaos in others. Your calm will feel like rebellion. Your wholeness will destabilize systems built on fragmentation. This is your myth, not a story where you slay dragons, but one where you become the fire, not a tale where you are saved, but one where you stop waiting for rescue and become your own sanctuary. And this myth will outlive you in the moments when someone chooses truth over comfort, because you did. In the silence they protect, because you modeled it. In the decision to walk away from everything false, because they saw you do the same. You become not a guru, not a savior, but a signal, a quiet, grounded proof that wholeness is possible, and that is rare in a culture that shouts. You will whisper and be heard more clearly in a society that feeds on urgency. You will move slowly and unsettle the room in a world obsessed with fixing. You will stand unbroken, not because you were never fractured, but because you let every fracture lead you home. That is your legacy, not perfection, not performance, but presence. The world may never celebrate your name, it may never understand your silence, but some part of it will bend, ever so slightly, because you existed with clarity. Jung knew this. He said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Not everyone will answer that calling. Most will sleepwalk through their lives, wearing borrowed faces, chasing someone else's dreams, but a few, just a few, will wake up, will go deeper, will do the terrifying work of returning to themselves. You are among the few, and now that you see, you cannot unsee. So live mythically, live deliberately, live as if your very breath is a refusal to abandon yourself again. That is the revolution, that is the return, and that is how your myth begins. If you found this exploration of Stoicism inspiring, please like the video, subscribe to the channel for more philosophical insights, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement helps us continue to bring you content that enriches your life. Thank you for watching.